Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of the Alpam Network podcast. My name is Virginia, and today we have a special guest that's joining us. His name is Mr. Hal Weatherman. He's a candidate for Lieutenant Governor right here in North Carolina. Mr. Weatherman is a husband, he's a father, he's a principled limited government conservative with a vision for the state that emphasizes optimism, hard work, and individual rights. So we're excited to dive into your background, Mr. Weatherman, your
Sure.
mission and plans for North Carolina. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be with you and appreciate the opportunity to get the word out. And as I told you before we went on air, I'm on the side of the road. I'm actually in King, North Carolina, which is on the Stokes-Forsyth County line. Been up since about 4 o'clock this morning. Been on the road for most of that time, and just traveling the state, working hard. There's 11 of us running for lieutenant governor. And our primary is March 5th. As you know, it's coming up quick. So I'm out trying to earn the vote.
Right. Well, thank you for pulling over to the side of the road and doing this with us today. So let's dive into it. So can you share more about your journey from your roots in North Carolina to becoming a candidate for lieutenant governor?
Sure. I was born in North Carolina. So I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, born at Presbyterian Hospital, same hospital that Billy Graham was born in. And split my childhood between two different locations, between Charlotte, North Carolina, and a small town called Elkin, North Carolina, which is up in Surrey County in the foothills of Blue Ridge Parkway. I tell people Elkin's where my heart is, where my home is, where I'll retire one day, whenever that day comes, and I'm sure that's where I'll be buried one day. But my childhood, I graduated from Charlotte Christian School, went to Wake Forest University, was a religion major. Went to Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois for my graduate school. I actually went to seminary there. Halfway through the seminary program, decided I was at the right school, wrong program. Felt like God was calling me to go a different direction. I felt like He wanted me to go into what I call culture building. Don't know what that means. Didn't know what it meant. Graduated and went to work for a private sector firm. And one day, out of the blue, my phone rang, and it was Sue Myrick, who I had met in high school. Sue was the first female mayor of the city of Charlotte and served in Congress for 18 years. At that time, she had just won the election and asked if I would go on staff with her. And I reluctantly said yes, because I was very happy in the private sector. And I told her, I will give you 2 years. I'll give you 2 years. And so 27 years later, after I worked all 18 years in her congressional office, rose up to be the chief of staff there. And then I worked for her son, which a lot of people don't make the connection, but her son is Dan Forrest, who was lieutenant governor of North Carolina, and I was with Dan for all 8 years. He was the lieutenant governor, and obviously we ran for the governorship in 2020 and lost. And I started an election integrity nonprofit that I still run. That's my day job, called the Electoral Education Foundation, concerned with election integrity in North Carolina. But about a year ago, my wife and I, when it became clear that Mark Robinson was about to try to ascend to the governorship, that we started talking as a family, like, why aren't we running for lieutenant governor? We know the state. We've traveled the state. I've traveled over 500,000 miles when I was with Dan Forrest, gone to all 100 counties multiple times. And we just were very prayerful about it. And then we had a family meeting with all my kids. I have 3 kids, all teenagers. And we said, because it'll be a huge family commitment, what if your father ran for lieutenant governor? And unanimous, we all, were in it. And so we just immediately hit the road. And so that was about a year ago. And we've been on the road now for almost a solid year, 5-6 days a week. Most of the time I'm traveling in a big campaign bus that we sleep on some nights. And I love traveling the state. I've already gone to all 100 counties in this race. We've gone to 35 counties 5 times or more. And so, I believe personally that you need to know the state. If you're running for governor or lieutenant governor, you need to know the state, and you need to know it intimately, because I believe the Bible to be true. And the Bible says a people without a vision, they perish. And I ask people this all the time. What's the vision of North Carolina? What's the vision of our country? And if you can't answer that, then the answer is clear. I actually believe we as a people are in a state of perishment. And I want to help paint a vision for the state of North Carolina. And, with whomever the next governor is of this great state. And so that's what we're doing. We're out work in the state, but we're learning the state as we go along. It's a continuing education to know every county, what makes them tick, what are their strengths, and how can we play to them? What are their weaknesses, and how can we mitigate them? And so I love the journey I'm on. I absolutely do. I tell people all the time, I win either way, win, lose, or draw. I win either way because I get to, for this period of time, I get to travel the state, meet with everyone from the janitor to the CEO and everywhere in between. And I think the people of the state are our greatest asset. So I get to interact with them every day, and I enjoy it. I really do. But I hope we win. I'm in it to win it. We got a good team, good strategy. It's not our first rodeo, and it's going very well. The response has been very strong.
Good, good. So let's go back to that time that you spent with Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest and Congresswoman Sue Merrick. How have your experiences with them as their of staff, how did that shape what your perspective is going to be on public service and policy?
It's a great question. I actually get asked that quite frequently. With Sue, I learned everything about how to be a public servant. Sue and Dan are both very good Christian, devout Christian people, but I learned about how to pull people together. Sue is a grassroots activist. When she ran for mayor back in 1987, the Republicans could not find a candidate to run against Harvey Gantt, who was a very popular mayor in Charlotte. And Sue came from 40, no exaggeration, she came from 43 percentage points down to win that race. And she won with the last precinct reporting of the night. So she only won by a handful of votes. And she did it through old fashioned retail politics, grassroots activism, door to door, knocking on doors, and pulling people together. So from her, I kind of learned retail politics, and I learned the value of relationships, and to do it all from a biblical worldview, with no fear or no apology, to be gentle as a dove and wise as a serpent. And so that's kind of what I learned from her. From Dan, they're so similar, but yet they're completely two unique, different people. From Dan, I learned the value of learning the state, because Dan's like my brother, and we traveled the state, and I was with him for basically everywhere, and I got to meet the people of the state, and so much like Sue, grassroots activism, all of that was ingrained in him, and so it was a very natural fit. But he afforded me the opportunity through continuous travel. He had um, an instinct to know that let's don't govern this from Raleigh. Let's govern it from the road, so that our ear could be to the road at all times. We would know the pulse of the people. Don't be dependent on polls. Don't be dependent on that. Actually go out and meet the people, and be unfiltered at all times. We didn't run anything through a prism or a filter. We directly eyeball to eyeball with people, and so that's what I would say. Both of them had a very profound influence on where I am today. And it's a very natural fit for me because I was with them and I considered them family. And so it was kind of a group mentality. And now I carry that on into my race, and it's going well.
Okay, okay. So, being a published author and having advised many candidates for over the decades, what key lessons have you learned that you would say and believe are crucial?
That's a great question. I mean, I always tell people, know what your magic number is from a campaign perspective, because I've run, I think, 14 campaigns. Five of them were statewide. And so the first thing is know what number it is that you need to get to victory from a campaign perspective. And then anchor your time and your money towards the pursuit of that number. So in other words, the two things, the two most precious commodities in any campaign that you will run out of, no matter who you are, is time and money. And so you have to make sure you spend your most precious commodity in an efficient way that's always tied to a goal. It's got to be anchored. I call it anchoring. And so, I think we're very good prognosticators of what that magic number is. And then we break that number out into all 100 counties. And then we spend our time accordingly in pursuit of getting in front of enough people to attain that number. And I certainly have advised, hundreds of candidates over the years on just the basics. And the other is just to keep coming back. is to keep touching the voter as many times, points of contact as you can. I call it the cadence system. And I've advised many candidates on that as well. Most consultants in today's world won't do that. Most consultants want to help their clients, if you will, raise money, stockpile the money, hold it until maybe the last 30 to 45 days of the campaign, and then dump the money on 30-second TV sound bites or radio or digital or whatever it is. I'm not against traditional advertising. We do traditional advertising and will do traditional advertising. But the first fruits of my labor, the first fruits of my time, the first fruits of my donations, the first fruits of my attention goes to being on the road. And that has been my entire career, good, bad, or otherwise. I really believe that we don't focus on election day. We don't focus on election day. We focus on every meeting that we have. We focus on every interview that we have, every one-on-one encounter that we have, every speech. I said a prayer before I came on to talk to you. I do that before every encounter. And if you focus on the journey, you'll be present. You'll be present in the moment. And I really think God has called, I think what God desires for people who are seeking to serve people is a servant's heart. And that starts with, it is less important what's coming out of my mouth as a candidate. What's more important is me as a potential lieutenant governor. Do I have eyes to see what is put in front of me? Do I have ears to hear what is being said to me so that I can intimately learn people, what makes them tick? I've learned this through all these years in politics, that every man, every woman carries a burden because we're all fallen and we all carry a burden and we're dependent on something that we desperately want to break free from. And my job as not so much a candidate, but just as a child of God, is to relate to people and hear where they are and to see if there's something that I can do, even if it's a little thing, to lift that burden off of them. And so we focus on the journey. And so that's why I say I win either way, because I have this amazing opportunity to go around. But, we try to be present with everyone that we're with. I hope that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, it absolutely does. Thank you. So, focusing on your mission statement, it mentions that you have a commitment to limited government. So, how do you balance fiscal and social conservatism? And what specific policies do you advocate that will align with these principles?
Yeah, so I don't think fiscal and social conservatism are at odds with one another. In fact, I think they go together, right? And so to me, there's no internal conflict or philosophical conflict. Look, in principle, this is what I believe. I'm a limited government constitutional Christian conservative. What does that mean? It means I believe in the government. I do, even the federal government. I'm not anti-government in any way. I believe that government at all level is God ordained, that God ordained it to provide civility and order and peace and safety to his people. And so, I believe in that. However, I do believe in limited government, which means once the government has reached its limit, let man live free. That is not the world we live in today. I think the overreach of our federal government is massive. I think our state of North Carolina is addicted to federal funds. And here's the analogy I use. The woke agenda is very much alive and well in this country. And I use the analogy of the drug dealer. If you watch the drug dealer on the playground, the first round is always for free. The second that drug dealer gets the kids addicted to the drugs, he can come back and lace that drug with anything he wants, and they'll take it with a smile on their face. That is the state of North Carolina today. We are addicted to federal funds, not realizing basically every funding source that the federal government doles out now has been laced with what I call the woke agenda. All these three-letter acronyms: DEI, SEL, CRT. It's just the DNA. It's just the DNA of the woke agenda, broken into its component parts, tied to federal funding, and being given to us. And we're taking it with a smile on our face. Once it gets into your system, whatever institution it is, once it's in the system, it's like cancer and it metastasizes and it grows. And I want our state to be self-sufficient. I want our state to start pushing back against the federal government and the ideologies that it is pushing. And it pains me to say that. I love America and I believe in the government. I do. But it is usurping our rights as individuals. And it's wrong because these ideologies are absolutely meant to divide us, not unite us, to divide us. And it's making us weak as a people and as a country and as a state. And so um, that's fiscal and social policy right there, tied into one. I want our state to be self sufficient. My message that I preach everywhere I go is to prepare your families to be self sufficient in a precarious world and prepare your state to be self sufficient in a dangerous world. I'm very concerned about the world we live in today. And I don't think the salvation is going to come from Washington. I think it's going to come from constitutionally sound, limited government, conservative governors. And in fact, that is what you're seeing around the country today. I'll use Greg Abbott down in Texas right now. Good for him. Good for him as the federal government is abdicating its control of the southern border. We are literally seeing an invasion happening. North Carolina and every state in this union will bear the price for this. Our social services are going to be, these people are going to come inland. They're going to come to every one of our states. And we're going to have to deal with terrorism like we've never seen before. I truly believe that in the days to come, because so many of these people coming across the border are OTMs other than Mexicans. And many are coming from countries that wish us ill. And these are able-bodied males of fighting age. And I am very concerned about that. In fact, millions of people are concerned about that. So good for Greg Abbott for doing what he is doing. And I think North Carolina needs a taste of that as well. We need a governor who will stand up for the sovereignty of the state and its people and work with the federal government. But if the federal government starts to abdicate its responsibility or starts to force feed us these ideologies through the federal funds, have the wherewithal to say, we don't want your money. We don't want it, and we want to stand alone and let man live free.
Okay.
Over a little bit. Sun is coming in. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. So going back, let's talk about a different 3-letter acronym. Okay, the EEF, the Electoral Education Foundation. You're the founder. You're the president of that, and you've displayed a dedication to advancing election integrity. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. How do you plan to bring this dedication to the lieutenant governor's office?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for acknowledging EEF. You know, we're a little under the radar screen. We're a small nonprofit. We're a 501c3, and I am the president of it. I'm very careful not to mix my role as president of EEF with my candidacy for lieutenant governor, because I'm obviously in a partisan pursuit right now, and that is a federally recognized C3 nonprofit organization. However, you know, I do believe in election integrity. I want to restore trust to our electoral system. I think millions of people have lost trust and are losing trust in it, and that's dangerous to our republic. North Carolina has a fairly transparent election system. We do, in comparison to other states. My organization archives all updates that the State Board of Elections does every week, every day. Every day that they update it, we archive it. We maintain our servers, and we compare the archives to the archives. And we isolate the movements that we think correlate the highest to potential fraud. And then we identify vulnerabilities in the system. And we work with the General Assembly to educate them on, here's some vulnerabilities that you need to shore up in the election system. This was born out of the 2020 election and me running Dan Force's campaign. Like I said, I've run 14 campaigns. The only campaign I ever lost in out of 27 years was that one. And there were millions, not millions, excuse me. There were multitudes of things that I had no one to turn to. Like I'm not an expert on North Carolina election law and elections, but I'm pretty close after all these years. I'm pretty close. And there were things I saw in that race that I had never seen before and had absolutely no one to turn to. Not the RNC, not the GOP, no disrespect, but the questions I was asking, they, you know, like crickets. And so I knew that we lacked a tool, if you will, to analyze the data at the microscopic level and to track movements in the voter file. My theory is this: regardless of what kind of fraud, if fraud is being committed, okay, I'll put it like that. If fraud is being committed, whether it's provisional ballot fraud, same day voter registration fraud, ballot box fraud, voter impersonation, whatever the fraud it is, something correspondingly must move in the file, in the voter file. So rather than try to catch individual acts of fraud, go monitor the file itself and watch for those movements that have the highest correlation. And that's a different methodology than other election integrity groups around the country use. I will tell you that there's a lot of interest in the research that we do. There are a lot of national groups that follow what we do. Um, but I'm a private citizen. I'm just like you. I am not an elected official. I am a private citizen, and I had to go out on my own after Dan lost, after we lost Dan's race. Had to go out on my own and raise several $100,000, hire a staff, buy the technology, and and conduct the research. And we've been doing that continuously now for 3.5 years, and we're going to continue it all the way through this election cycle so that we can have trust in our system. But I think it's sad that a private citizen has to do that because his state government is not doing that. I think that's wrong. And so one of the reasons I am running for lieutenant governor, it's on my website and it's in my platform, if you will, is I've made a pledge. Unless the General Assembly creates a secondary fixed point, unless they create a secondary agency or a secondary entity that will monitor and serve as a watchdog and a check and balance of the state board of elections, if they do not do that before I get into office, I will embed, I publicly disclose this, I will embed into the office of lieutenant governor, in the staff that I hire, experts on election law, and we will take the responsibility as the lieutenant governor of North Carolina of being a perpetual watchdog of the state board of elections. Again, I think it's sad that a private citizen has to do this, but until it's fixed, that's our commitment, because I believe in our system and I want to restore trust in it. But there are things in our system right now that, especially with mail-in ballots here in North Carolina, that I have major problems with, and you should too. Anybody concerned with election integrity should, because I really do think that the mail-in ballots is a huge vulnerability point here in North Carolina. Every state is different. We don't do ballot harvesting here. Other states allow ballot harvesting. So here, our major concern is mail-in ballots. And in the 2020 election, mail-in ballots accounted for almost 37% of all ballots cast. Prior to that, 40 years prior, going back in time, on average, you could take to the bank, mail-in ballots would account for about 2.7%, no higher than 3%. In 2020, of the 5.55 million ballots that came in, 37% of them were mail-in. And it lacks the checks and balances, and it's undercutting the integrity of our system. And so, I want to curtail that massively.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, I got a little rant.
No,
I'll ramble.
that's something I could go on about like all day. So, but we won't. We won't. Yeah. So let's go to a new question. Your campaign has an optimistic emphasis on appealing to the hopes and aspirations of the people of North Carolina. So, how do you plan to implement this as our lieutenant governor?
Well, I think, if I'm elected lieutenant governor, we have to remind ourselves, especially when you're in the middle of a primary that's hyper partisan, right? I have to remind even Republican groups, if I'm elected, if I have the honor and the privilege to serve as lieutenant governor of North Carolina, I'll represent all people of all, ages, races, creeds, beliefs, Christians, non-Christians, multiple faiths, all of the above. I'm disclosing who I am. I'm not hiding who I am, right? But I believe in our Constitution, and I believe our Constitution protects the rights of all people. And I feel strongly about that. And so, I tell people in this hyper-partisan world that we're in today that, no matter who you vote for, if they love the Constitution and they believe in its founding principles and the ideals that it represents, then we should be able to find some commonality that we can agree on. What I find today, and it's sad to say, is that we are beyond, as a people, debating Republican versus Democrat. We've evolved from that to conservative versus liberal. We've evolved past that to those who love America and the principles it was founded on, and those who actually disagree with the founding principles of our country, and they're trying to tear us down. That's where we are as a people right now. And so I want to find common ground. I want to work with people, but I'm not going to compromise on basic principles. I'm not going to compromise on my faith, and I'm not going to compromise on the Constitution. And so many of the problems that I see sprouting up in our nation today are because we are getting away. We're getting away from our founding principles, and we need to return to them. So, but I do look forward to, I believe that all mankind, all of us, we were all created in God's image. And so far be it from me not to look to every person that I meet, regardless of who they are or what their party affiliation is, and not find some kind of commonality with them. And I see that every chance I get.
All right. So you mentioned that one of your primary goals is to remove the stigma on working in the trades. So how do you plan to use the influence of the Lieutenant Governor's office to
Yeah.
achieve this cultural shift in the state?
Yeah, I do. I believe that God put man on this earth to work, mankind, man and woman. God put man on this earth to work. That is where our dignity comes from. When we work, our self respect comes from there. When we work, our self sufficiency comes there. When we work, that is where we train the next generation what's expected of them. But instead, our society, especially here in North Carolina, for generation after generation, we've been pushing kids into the 4 year university model. I'm not against college. I have a college degree, I have a master's degree. I'm not against that. Um, but we can no longer, as a society, push these kids into a 4 year degree structure where they're coming out with a degree in Egyptian poetry. They come out with $100,000 in debt and they can't find a job. And what we need to do, while there's hundreds of thousands of jobs open in the trades, I tell young kids all the time, because I'm at that age now where they'll say, "What do you think I ought to do, for, with my life?" And I'll say, "Do you want to be the boss man? Do you want to be an entrepreneur? Do you want to own your own business? Yes. Do you want to make 6 figures a year? Well, yeah. Do you want to build a business that you could sell 10 years from now, 15 years from now, or 7+ figures and retire?" And they're like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Go be a plumber, go into
Mhm.
HVAC, go be an electrician." I want to use, but our society has put a stigma on that. If I'm
Mhm.
the lieutenant governor, I'll serve on the State Board of Education and the State Board of Community Colleges. And from those two platforms, what I want to do is remove that stigma. I want to retrain our guidance counselors in the high schools with the same intensity they're pushing the kids into the 4 year universities. I want them to push them into the trades. Number one. Number two, I would like to create what I call a 2-and-2 degree. And the 2-and-2 degree is the 2-and-2 degree would be you go to the first, these are kids that are going to go to college. They go the first 2 years if they want to a trade school and they become an electrician. They get a certification, a degree, and all of that, or HVAC or whatever, commercial welding, whatever they want to go into. Then they transfer to one of the UNC school systems and they complete their education by getting a degree customized to the trades in graphic design, marketing, budget, finance, business. So they have all the tools to be the entrepreneur, to run a business, coupled with the skill set, the trades, that's going to make them profitable the rest of their life and self sufficient. Why aren't we doing this? Why are we not doing this? And so, that would be one way. I'd like to dive into the apprenticeship program here in North Carolina. We have an apprenticeship program. I'm not going to bash it. I'm not saying it's bad, but if I'm being honest and compare it to other states, Texas, Georgia, South Carolina, ours is not well publicized. It's not overutilized. It's a little clunky, and we don't use our tax code here in North Carolina to properly incentivize companies to use it. And I think we need to retool all of it. And I want to insert myself in the middle of that as lieutenant governor and to drive apprenticeships. I want North Carolina to be number one in apprenticeships because what I hear from employers all over the state is they need a permanent, consistent pipeline of skilled labor, and they lack it. And there's no permanent pipeline. We need to create that pipeline. I think the apprenticeship programs are the way to do that. And then the other thing would be I want to continue introducing children to trade work and working with your hands, manufacturing, light manufacturing, all kinds of manufacturing. I want to introduce that to them earlier than we are currently doing. Now, there are places in the States where they are doing it. I've got a good friend who owns a commercial grading company up in Burnsville, up in Yancey County, up in the mountains. And their county, don't have the resources to put equipment in schools like seventh grade. So their company donated equipment. And then they do project-based learning in those schools to expose kids as early as seventh grade to working with your hands in case they like it. Because otherwise, some of these kids, by the time they're 16, are just going to drop out of school. And instead, it's giving them a passion and a hope. And that's what we need to give our kids. They've already started polling Generation Z, Generation Alpha, the youngest generations now. And it's interesting. The polling is showing that they are coming out, they're coming into life intrinsically valuing life itself, meaning they're pro life in the pro life, pro abortion spectrum. They're coming out more pro life, which is really interesting in the culture we live in today. When left alone, they value life. But simultaneously, those polls are showing that they are the most anxious, stressed, and suicide-prone generations that we've ever seen. Which to me says there's a disconnect. They're coming into life, valuing life, and wanting to be a part of life, and quickly, as they're encountering our culture and the adults of this world, they are losing hope at the beginning part of their life, and that is a dangerous place to be as a culture. I want to restore hope to future generations in the state, and I can't do everything about. I can't. I don't have a magic wand, but one of the greatest places that a man or a woman gets their hope, their dignity, their self-respect, their self-esteem, their self-sufficiency, is from work. So we need to restore the basic concept of the dignity of work, an honest day's wages for an honest day's work. That's what our parents grew up on. That's what their parents grew up on. And today, that is not the case. That is not the case. That is not what we teach. Even look at what the federal government is doing. For the last 3, 4 years, our federal government's been paying man not to work. Shame on them, because they're going to create more than worker shortages and more than supply chain problems. They're going to create a very dark, deep cultural, spiritual divide in our country. And I would argue it's already done. That's where we are. And we're trying to dig ourselves out of that. I hope I'm making sense. These are the things
Oh,
that are on my heart. This is what I talk about every night when I'm on the spot.
good. Yeah. Well, we got one more question. Can't end it without going into agriculture in North Carolina. It's a cornerstone of our economy here. And so, will you elaborate on your plans to transition the state's agriculture industry from the fresh market to the global market
Yeah.
and how that aligns with your vision for economic growth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, agriculture is our state's number one industry. It's $100 billion industry a year. It's far bigger than, we're a finance hub, we're a manufacturing hub, distribution hub, warehousing hub. Ag is still the largest. And I would, like to grow our ag industry from $100 billion industry a year to a $200 billion industry over the next 10 years. And I believe this is very doable. Commissioner Steve Troxler is pushing this agenda. And to be quite honest, had Dan Forest won the governor's race, we would be neck deep in helping to push this agenda to a further, than where we are right now. Here's the problem. The world population has already exceeded 8 billion people, but we have a global food shortage. And so if you are from an ag state in the United States, you have a God-given resource and you have a God-given window of opportunity to feed the world. We're an ag state, so we have that resource. Our problem is we do grow here in North Carolina primarily for the fresh market, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to feed the world, you can't necessarily just grow and consume in short order. You've got to grow and then process your food, preserve it, ship it around the globe. You have to preserve the food. I want to see North Carolina go into food processing to a much higher degree than we currently are. But to do that, we're going to have to make some structural and infrastructural improvements in the state. I'll use Morehead City as an example. We have two ports in North Carolina. We have Wilmington, we have Morehead City. Morehead City is a deep water port. You need a deep water port to feed the world because the ships that take our containers, they're bigger ships and all of that. So they need a deep water port. Our forefathers in Morehead City, God bless them, put the rail line into Morehead City right downtown. It goes right through downtown.
Right.
So to unload one of those really big ships, you're going to wind up shutting down the economic vitality of the entire downtown because they're going to have to shut down the downtown to service the ship. Can't do that. Can't do that. So we need to reroute that rail line. We need to reroute that rail line. If you reroute the rail line, which is expensive, then you've got to reroute some of the connecting highway systems down in that area, which is equally expensive. Our state does make investments in what are called inland ports. This is where the farmers trailer their foods, their supplies, right, to the inland port. Then they're put on rail and then taken to Wilmington or to Morehead City. I would like to grow the inland ports, do more of them. Okay. And then once we do that and get the stuff to Morehead City, we need more cold storage. So we compete against the ports in Norfolk and Charleston, and our cold storage facility capacity is about 20% of what our competitors have. So, in order to feed the world, what do we have to do? We have to make infrastructural improvements into the Morehead City port. We need to reroute the rail line, reroute some of the roads, continue investing in inland ports, and we need to up our cold storage capacity. But if we do that, which is expensive, and I get it, but our state's running year over year $5 to $8 billion worth of surplus. It's time for us to invest in agriculture because the return on investment of this is massive. When I say I want to create food processing plants, I want the farmers to create the food processing plants. The most entrepreneurial people I know are farmers. And you let them partner with the state or partner with venture capital. Let them run the food processing plant. You're already seeing this in some areas, like up in the Yadkin Valley wine region, where I'm from. They've started creating grape crush co-ops. You got 80 some wineries up there, but they need to crush the grapes to blend grapes to make, hybrid wines for the mass market. And so rather than each winery doing that, they partnered up there. A friend of mine runs one of them, and started creating wine bottling co-ops. That's a food processing plant. That is processing of food. They're preserving that thing so you don't have to consume it on site. You can ship it around the world. These are the things that we need to be doing. And if we do, though, the dividends for the state will be massive. For Eastern North Carolina, massive. But even for the West, I mean, people forget. Everybody thinks ag. They think East. The western part of the state is equally ag. We're the Christmas tree capital of the world. We're huge on apples in Hendersonville and that whole area. We do a lot of mixed salad products in the western part of the state. And so this will be a boom for all of us. And all that has to be financed. So it's good for our finance. Food processing needs manufacturing. So that's good for manufacturing. If they're going to store things and ship things, they're going to have to warehouse it. It's good for warehousing. See, it connects all the dots. So I definitely want to be a leader in that. I want to help champion that. If you can't tell, I'm very passionate about that, especially as I travel around places like Eastern North Carolina, because I see a lot of economic prosperity in Charlotte and Raleigh, but I can still show people pockets of poverty and lack of economic development all over the state. And it's because we're not using our God-given resources, and we're not stepping up and filling this God-given window of opportunity to feed the world. Why aren't we doing that? And I'd love to help. I'd love to help as Lieutenant Governor to do that.
All right. That sounds great. I'm going to give you the opportunity. If there's anything I've left out that you want to add in here, the floor is yours.
Well, I'll just simply say thank you. Thank you for having me. My primary is March the 5th. Early voting starts February 15th. If you want to vote by mail, that's already started. I'm Hal Weatherman. I'm a limited government constitutional Christian conservative. There'll be no on-the-job training for me as Lieutenant Governor. I've already been there and served in that capacity as Chief of Staff. I know the state, know it intimately, and I'm continuing to refresh my knowledge base by traveling county to county. I tell people all the time, because sometimes my opponents will make fun of my travel, and then sometimes people will say stuff about the travel. It's not a stunt. It's not a PR stunt. I am interviewing for the job. I am intimately aware that if I win this job, you do not work for me. I work for you. And I'm trying to show you how hard I'm going to work for you by going county by county, interviewing for the job, one interview at a time, one person at a time, one meeting at a time, one podcast at a time. And so, I ask for your support. If you like anything that I've said here today and you believe in that, I ask for your vote. I need it. Otherwise, we have to start electing limited government constitutional Christian conservatives. We have to. And so I'm probably putting myself out there for the job. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I really do. It means a lot.
And thank you so much, Mr. Weatherman, for your insights and your vision for North Carolina. It's clear that you're dedicated to creating positive change and opportunities for the people of this state. And to our listeners, make sure you stay tuned for more engaging conversations on the Alpam Network podcast.